welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli, that's Bud Elliott, that's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson, coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe. Subscription numbers going up. When we hit 50, we got something special for you. Hit that like on the video as well for everybody hanging out, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate. Lots to get to here on a Monday. How do you take on 4 other human beings by yourself and your hat is not lost? Yeah, we can get into that. We've got more updates from Tennessee v. the NCAA, a proposal for moving the early signing period, but we begin with just like an absolute travesty for the National Football League. I mean, what is the NFL going to do? How are they going to keep their coaches when these coaches keep running off to college football? Because news breaks over the weekend that Eric Bieniemy, longtime offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs, he was with the Washington Commanders, and he is going to be Deshaun Foster's offensive coordinator at UCLA. That's right, the former Colorado great, and one-time UCLA head coach. He was a running backs coach there previously. He will be the associate head coach and offensive coordinator for UCLA. This is a splash hire. Eric Bieniemy has been viewed as a potential NFL head coaching candidate, an offensive mind that's kind of been on the cutting edge of things. Danny, in your time being able to cover, obviously, the NFL as well as college football, your thoughts on getting to see Bieniemy come to UCLA and sort of what that means for Deshaun Foster and the Bruins?
So, one, to put on your first point, I think Roger Goodell is probably scrambling right now, reviewing the rules of free agency to make sure that they don't have an epidemic of coaches leaving the game. As I make that joke, I do realize I was one of the people at the beginning of this cycle wondering, does college football have a problem? But I gave up on trying to decipher that trend a few weeks ago, because this isn't the only NFL to college coach we've seen. So I do think that is absolutely a part of the conversation that does have to be mentioned. But for Eric Bieniemy coming back, I think there's 2 things I think you have to consider, and I think both of them are valid. And I'll get to whatever you want on what he does scheme-wise, because I think there is more commonality, crossover between college and NFL in offensive schemes than there's ever been. There very much used to be from the NFL's perspective, we're better than that. We don't do that. We'll never take concepts from college football. And it has completely flipped, where they are now realizing there is a treasure trove of offensive philosophies, schemes, plays, whatever you want to look at. They're saying, oh, wait, you guys been doing this and we can do this. And so you're seeing that influx into the NFL in masses, which I do think is probably why we're seeing some of this coach, carryover, why we're seeing more than ever, why we're seeing coaches from NFL go to college and college go to the NFL, because it's not that big of a jump scheme-wise. But for Foster and his staff, I think, one, it brings credibility. You're talking about a coach who not many people know. Now you bring in the coach who helped Patrick Mahomes achieve greatness and can flash those Super Bowl rings and recruiting meetings and tell you about working with the best. I think this 100% brings some credibility for recruiting to make them a more attractive destination for quarterbacks and offensive players. And then 2, the other aspect of this, and I don't think this is that crazy, I think this is one step closer to Eric Bieniemy becoming the next head coach at Colorado. Whenever that may be, I do think this brings him back on the stage where he's in college. It's a smoother transition. He'll get familiarity with the NIL landscape, which he hasn't been able to have, and the transfer portal, the rules. I do think that is very much one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons Eric Bieniemy is back in college.
The reason Eric Bieniemy is back in college is because there were 8 coaching changes at the NFL level, including the team he was at, where he lost his job as offensive coordinator, and none of the new 8 head coaches wanted him as their offensive coordinator. That's the reason he's back in college. It's not to set up. I mean, maybe he'll end up with the Colorado job, but I would guess that if he gets offered an NFL OC job, he'll take that before he takes the Colorado head coaching job. It was surprising because Bieniemy's name has been out there a lot. Like he's been mentioned in the Colorado job numerous times when it's been open the last few years. But like this was somebody who was seen, when he was the offensive coordinator at the Chiefs with Mahomes and they're winning Super Bowls, which they still are, by the way. he was seen as, like the up and coming whatever OC, and everybody's like, wow, nobody's hiring this guy for head coach. Nobody's hiring this guy for head coach. Now they're not hiring for offensive coordinator. Maybe the narrative didn't really match the reality of the situation. I don't know. If I'm UCLA, like, okay, I mean, it's not that he's a bad offensive coach. I don't think he's a bad offensive coach at all. It's just, I think that the shine has come off of the narrative around Eric Bieniemy, and the fact that he has gone from being Andy Reid's, likely successor, the head coach in waiting in Kansas City, if Andy Reid ever decides to retire, to now being the offensive coordinator at UCLA, kind of says everything you need to know.
If the NFL teams know something that we don't, I think it's probably fair to defer to them. And my guess is that they do. Maybe they don't think he's as good of a coach as a lot of the NFL media either does or perhaps did, is the better word there. Really, in the NFL, we have a major problem, is that not everybody gets to coach Patrick Mahomes. And it's really, it's a shame. I think it's an epidemic, right? There's only one Patrick Mahomes. And when you don't have Patrick Mahomes anymore, you do risk getting exposed. Still, like, this is a good hire for UCLA, in my opinion, because even though we could sit here and say, he's probably not going to get another NFL offensive coordinator job. Like, he's not in super high demand in the NFL. On the recruiting trail, he can still pitch, hey, man, like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, I worked with all those dudes. I was the OC for some Super Bowl teams. So, yeah, I think there's both things can be true. He's not in super high demand anymore in the NFL. It's still a pretty damn good hire for UCLA, given, kind of the, not restrictions, but sort of just like difficult things they have to work under right now at UCLA for Deshaun Foster. And yeah, like, we see guys that, I guess the only mistake that he made here was not getting out before he lost his job. Right. So, like we saw a lot of these college guys who were probably going to get fired. They jump out a year early. It's just smart to not have was fired on your resume.
I think it's a great opportunity for him, because you know how he's spinning this story, right? This is the quote. He said, via text message to CBS Sports NFL insider Josina Anderson and NFL writer Garrett Podell. Hope I'm getting that right. I'll shout you out otherwise if not. I chose, this is again a quote offered via text message from Eric Bieniemy to CBS Sports. I chose to fly under the radar this hiring cycle, and my experience generated a lot of interest from a number of NFL teams prior to coming to this decision. So his story is, man, I'm just working on me. I'm just going to lay low. I'm going to work on me. This is a good opportunity for me. And I agree, it's a great opportunity for him, because this is a chance for you to be able to get a new opportunity to rebuild that brand. And it blew my mind, not blew my mind, but you jumped right to the place where Jeremy from the tailgate says Bieniemy is just bidding his time at UCLA until Deion flakes out at Colorado and he can go back to Boulder. Now, whether he would be really in the mix for that job, we'd see. Bud Elliott has, you've pointed out here on the podcast, look at Colorado's recruiting practices. What says that the operation right now is putting in the plan to be able to have class over class over class, to still be able to build in an upward momentum with a 3 to 4 year plan? The recruiting practices do not indicate 3 to 4 year plan at this time. Is that fair, Bud?
Yeah. I mean, like if Eric Bieniemy, if Deion were to leave Colorado and Eric Bieniemy gets presented with that Colorado job next year, do you take that? Because the way Colorado's recruiting, that thing is going to be a smoking crater when you get there, because of the lack of young talent. And I guess now with unlimited transfer portal, every team can be remade every single offseason. So, whatever in theory, but there is sort of a gravitas to Deion that Eric Bieniemy does not possess in terms of getting all these, regardless of how good they are. It's still hard to get 70 transfers to come say yes in one offseason and put together a team. So, like, that job may not be real attractive if Deion bounces after this year, like I think a lot of us think could be an option.
He was a former assistant for the Buffs as well. Tom, sorry, you want to get in here?
No, there's just arguing with somebody in the chat.
Last thing I want to say on this is we never would say, oh, like why wouldn't you stay in college instead of going to the NFL to a player, right? In terms of it's a better opportunity. It's a better league. You make a lot more money. That's really going to be true for college coaches because college coaches only make what they make because the players, all the schools colluded via the NCAA to not pay the stars of the game who are actually the players, not the coaches. All right, I had a pretty good stat the other day. There's like 242 NFL players who make 10 plus million, and there's like 10 NFL coaches who make that much. Like it won't happen immediately, but all these college guys, in terms of, they're not going to be like an immediate pay cut, I think, in most situations, but there will be a serious, like relative to the inflation rate of the college coaching salaries since 1984 Oklahoma case, like since they got those TV rights and it really blew up the game. These college coaches are not going to be getting rich in the way they once were compared to what the guys that came 10 years ago did, because the stars of the game are the players. So I think in 3-4 years, we're not going to have any question about this. Of course you go to the NFL. NFL coaches are going to make a hell of a lot more money than college coaches will in about 5 years.
So for the Eric Bieniemy side of this, Bud, when we look at UCLA's roster, what do you think the chances are for him to be able to make a splash, for him to be able to turn this around? I think that this is a good opportunity for Eric Bieniemy to flip the narrative on this and to do it at a place like UCLA. It's an opportunity. What are the chances are he succeeds?
I guess it depends on what we would define success, right? UCLA, their FanDuel win total right now is 5.5.
5.5, yeah.
So they're sort of coin flippy to make a bowl game in their first year in the Big Ten. I think if you're Deshaun Foster, your guy who obviously played in the NFL, UCLA's passing game and passing concepts when they weren't off play action last year were kind of limited. I think part of that's quarterback, and part of that is Chip wanting to focus more on some of the run game stuff. Maybe they're going to try to open it up with a little more diverse passing game.
Yeah, they're trying to be a little more pro style, whatever that means these days.
Yeah, what even is?
I think pro style just means you've coached in the NFL.
Yeah,
okay.
That's pretty much what it means these days.
Yeah, because there's not really much of a difference one way or the other by the time.
The difference is, and this could be a problem for the hire, the difference is NFL offenses are a lot more complicated and intricate because they have a lot more time to practice it. Whereas with a college offense, when you've got a limited amount of practice hours and you can only run so many plays and you have young quarterbacks who aren't NFL quarterbacks all the time, you kind of got to keep things simple, like from the route concepts and all the options and all that stuff that a player can take and the blocking schemes and yada, yada, yada. Like the NFL is much more complicated and intricate. So it's probably going to be a bit of an adjustment for Bieniemy to have to come to the college level and kind of change what he does.
There is a history of guys going from the NFL to college and really struggling to simplify. I think Bill Callahan is probably the most notable, right? When he took the Nebraska job after being he was what, OC of the Raiders?
Yes.
With Gruden? Yeah. Okay.
It's and that was what I think Wink Martindale could face an issue too. I don't think anybody understands how different, like that for me was the biggest jump going from Florida State to the NFL. It was the athleticism, the speed, all that. Like it's a jump, but for a quarterback especially, but I think it's every position, the amount of time you have to spend studying the concepts, your assignments, the adjustments, the opponent. Like I didn't have to study defense that much in college because nobody ran that much different stuff. All of a sudden the NFL, they've got, multiple looks of just cover 3 alone, multiple adjustments of cover 2. And like, all I really studied in college was cover 3, cover 2, some, cover
center
4,
open, center closed.
Like, yeah, that was it. But then you get to the NFL, all of a sudden they're doing something different on every play. And the same time, your playbook is 10x, the size that it was too. So that to me is something, but you have all day, like you're a big boy, that's your job. You're supposed to study and you have that time. Where in college, at least where we stand now, you are supposed to go to class. There is supposed to be a 20-hour work limit rule. Like all those things we can laugh, but there is only so much time in a day. Everybody goes over it, but it's still not anywhere near what they would need to be,
Still
studying.
need time to squeeze in those online, sports management courses.
Yeah, I was going to say, go to class, attend to class. Because like you can go to class. I don't know how many athletes are actually going to physical classes anymore. I think a lot of these schools just drop everybody in online classes.
Well, the good news is Eric Bieniemy and UCLA, they do have the offensive MVP of the Starco Brands LA Bowl ready to go. All right. I say that jokingly, but Ethan Garbers at his best when healthy, and again, at his best, when healthy, I'm throwing 2 qualifiers on there, but that's a quarterback that I think you can probably put something challenging on his plate and see if he's going to be able to go get it. So at least you're not dealing with a situation where there's 0 experience and you're going to be bringing in Eric Bieniemy and he's just looking at a bunch of 19-year-olds with no starts to their name. This is a player who has experience, who has played in competitive games at the power conference level. I think Ethan Garbers is the QB1 for the Bruins, and I think that he is a QB1 that can be very serviceable for Eric Bieniemy's first offense as the Bruins offensive coordinator.
I'd also bet they end up with much better spacing on their routes than they did under Chip.
Man, I tell you what, you can tell Tom's been grinding tape.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing has changed his life like that tape. hey, I heard it was told to me it was the best gift he'd ever received. So look at how it's changed. We got, by the way, all that tape grinding is going to help us out. We got a lot of great NFL draft coverage here on the Cover 3 podcast. Combine coming up a little bit later. We'll do combine takeaways with the golden dumbbells at the beginning of next week. Any before and after the draft, we'll have you covered here with the Cover 3 podcast as well. Coming up on the other side, we've talked a lot about how to change the calendar for the month of December so it's not everything happening all at once. Southeastern Conference has a proposal that involves moving early signing day. We'll get into the pros, the cons, what it might mean, and more next.
The madness doesn't just happen.
Yo, get ready!
And although it's marked on our calendars each year, it's built by moments of mayhem before.
And the crowd goes crazy!
And it begins to bubble long before it bursts. Sure, madness and marks may go hand in hand, but it starts right here.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, our friend Ian joined the tailgate about 30 minutes before the show started. He said, "It's my birthday today. No question from me. Just want to say you guys are the gift that keeps giving year round. Love the podcast. Ian, happy birthday. Thanks for coming to the tailgate." So there have been a lot of, big ideas but not a lot of concrete proposals in terms of ways to change what has become an incredibly hectic December calendar. But late last week, we got a proposal. Greg Sankey, representing the Southeastern Conference, is lobbying for an early signing day and then a recruiting dead period through the month of December, I believe, as it pertains to just high school recruiting. The quote from Yahoo Sports, Greg Sankey says, "Putting signing day in the middle of December with playoff games no longer works. Move it to early December, the Wednesday before the conference championship games." And he's right, because on December 20th, that will be the day of the first college football playoff first round games. And I believe this past year, December 20th, was the early signing day. So as you're how would you be trying to prepare for, especially the elite programs? You'd be going the weekend to a first round game, and then in the middle of that week, trying to lock down a majority of the highest rated players in your high school recruiting class. Something changing surely makes sense. Tom, what's do you think that this type of proposal is something that would work, or do you have any other counters or questions about it?
My only question on it is I have no idea what really will change out of it. I mean, yes, it makes it earlier. It does it conference championship week. And for most schools, that's not really a problem because they're not playing in their conference championship games. And also, who the hell knows how much longer we're going to have conference championship games the way things are going. My question more is, and this is what I've kind of always wondered, are we just heading to a spot where we don't really have a signing day at all? Like, are we just going to come to a point where it's like, if the kids want to sign on November 12th, let them sign on November 12th. If they want to sign on August 3rd, let them sign on August 3rd. It's the coach, the school has to honor it. The player has to honor it.
So there's some interesting thoughts here. I totally see where you're going with this, but there are certain rights that are going to be bargained away when we get to collective bargaining, which will probably happen sooner rather than later. But typically the youngest folks get screwed in, the unions eat their young, right? So I don't think that the current college players eventually are going to be looking out for the rights of high school signees. Just as like the NFL doesn't really care about what happens to the rookies, because guess what? Everybody voting on the stuff in the NFL, they ain't rookies anymore. So it's just sort of a thing that happens. Schedule-wise, this does make more sense to me than putting it in mid-December, especially with the new, playoff calendar. Now, there's really not a great time to have it. And I think to Tom's point, it is arguable that signing day doesn't matter anymore at all in terms of procedurally because you have unlimited transfers. So you could sign, enroll, and then still practice somewhere else for the spring semester. But there are still certain things that signing a prospect does kind of lock them into, right? At least for a short period of time. And I think teams are going to want to try to exert as much control of this as possible. Remember, the whole idea of early signing day, the PR pitch was, oh, we want these families to be able to enjoy Christmas without having to take phone calls from college coaches and they're being hounded. That was largely bullshit. What really was happening is that coaches did not want to, quote unquote, babysit their commitments, meaning like they didn't want to continue to recruit and work on their sales and maintain those relationships. Just like if you're a salesperson, maintaining the account, from, let's say, Thanksgiving to the first Wednesday in February, if you already had a kid who was pretty locked up, or if you could pressure him into just signing and getting it over and done with. So it really, early signing day reduced the workload on coaches a lot, So how will they kind of transfer that workload and make sure they try to reduce their workload even more? Moving it up makes a little bit more sense there, and it allows them to maintain, some level of control over the process. I've long argued for, let's put it in August. I know what the high school coaches will say, hey, my best players won't play because they're already signed. And then you can have a couple like certified pre-agreed upon outs. Okay. Hey, if the head coach, the coordinator on your side of the ball, your position coach, or maybe one other you designate like an area recruiter, if they leave, then you get a free opt-out of your letter of intent. Otherwise, no, use your transfer. But I don't know. That just seems like too much sense. And the sport doesn't always operate with a lot of sense.
I think the first reaction I had to this was, remember Nick Sabin said he wants to still be involved in the game and still have a voice. I think this probably comes directly from Sabin to Sankey, like advising him on what to do as somebody who would have been playing in a lot of those playoff games. I think he probably had some input on this, and probably a lot of coaches did, voicing their concern to Sankey. How can we make the calendar better? Let's try to move it up. I like Tom's idea. I don't know how realistic it is, but why have restrictions on it at any time? Why not just let a player commit when they want to, but have it binding, as opposed to, hey, I received 8,000 offers over the summer. Like, what about, hey, I agreed to this one and this is where I'm going, but then it actually has to stick from both sides.
I liked the August one just because it seems that during the year when we're doing our breakdown, even into the early signing period, the news is the news happens in August. The news happens in June. The news happens leading into your final year. And there does probably need to be some development, for coaches want that, maybe players want that as well. But the getting it off of December 20th or, whatever would be December 20th, that late December, feels like it absolutely has to happen. But I don't think you can have them. Don't you have to babysit more? And don't you have to tamper more if kids can sign anywhere and then they could transfer right away? Would you have a situation where a kid signs because he can sign at any time, but then automatically there's like a transfer that's built into the expectation of an early enrollment? It does seem like a signing anytime would be a little bit too chaotic to be able to be sustainable.
Could be.
Look, if we're going to care to pretend about it and like looking out for them, what the stories that I already know you would see popping up is, hey, this school found this kid. Nobody had really seen him yet. He didn't have a huddle tape. They realize he looks like Amarius Mims, did like, oh my God, hey, here's 10,000 sign with us binding in LI for, for 3 years or whatever it would happen in the future. And you're like, hold on, man. Like, some of these kids they're going to make like the Ozzy Albies deal look good, to where they're signing stuff so early. It's just like, that's probably a really, really bad deal for you to do. And they're not having like the full amount of information. So I would be fine with people signing any time in the fall and locking themselves in if they wanted to. I think I would be against signing, before before August, right? I don't want to see, February signing where you're signing more
As
than
a
a year
junior?
out. Yeah, right. Because then I think you're dealing with incomplete information.
If you want to see Amarius Mims knock a safety 5 yards onto his ass, check out my Twitter feed.
Yeah, he's a freak.
What?
Just talk about a nightmare scenario. You're a safety, you're coming up to make a play, and then here comes Amarius Mims running full speed at you. It's like, crap.
Oh man, I laugh so hard because you get these emails from these well-intentioned mom and dads like, "Hey, check out my 12-year-old." I'm like, "Look, man, I'd rather just see a picture of you and your wife to see how tall y'all are, and like it. All this training and stuff is great, and congrats on playing travel ball and all this other stuff. But like, do you win the puberty lottery or do you not? Because that's going to be about 95% of this. After that, the skills will matter. But the skills don't matter a damn if you don't."
We of course will be keeping our eyes on that as well as any other adjustments to the calendar before what is going to be a dizzying 2024 season in this new world after conference realignment and college football playoff expansion. All right, time to check in with some billable hours. Okay, we might need a little bit more from you, Bud, but Bud Elliott Esquire, we got to get you checking in here. So Tennessee was able to get the injunction in its case against the NCAA. We had a shout out from before the show started from the Cover 3 tailgate. You guys going to talk about the dagger to the heart of the NCAA on Friday. Do it for producer Jordan. Shout out to Jordan. Bud, what's the big takeaway from the latest development in this legal battle?
Yeah. So the takeaway is that the principles that we saw in Alston, in which the NCAA lost 9-0 to the Supreme Court, which that's a toughie there. These NIL rules that the NCAA is putting down violate antitrust. They are anti-competitive. They are colluding to depress market values of players. And the idea that you cannot be negotiating or enter into an agreement with somebody, a collective, or heck, even at this point, perhaps a school, before enrolling, that serves to limit the information available to the player and thus keeps their value down. And that's not allowed. So you could do that if you had collective bargaining and if the players all got together, organized, and agreed to let you restrict them in that way. But because, and this is what we always roll back to, right? Are you putting employer type restrictions on people who in the same federal courts you're filing say very stridently are not employees? That's just not going to work. That's kind of the one test you can keep rolling this. Are you trying to restrict people like you, like they're your employees? Yes. Do you also say they're not employees? Yes. All right. Pick one or the other. You can't have both. And that's what the court said. I think this was pretty foreseeable. We knew they probably would not get the temporary restraining order, the emergency one, because there really was no true urgency to this emergency. And it was only a monetary thing. It wasn't like somebody's life was in danger or something like that. So anyway, we'll see if the NCAA is going to appeal this. I haven't seen announced they would, but I assume that they always will because the NCAA kind of acts like local community governments. You ever notice this? Like any sort of elected local government, they rarely settle stuff, and then instead, you'll see these county commissioner type things like, oh well, they can sometimes they can hide behind the sovereign stuff, but usually it's just jury system, crazy unpredictable juries, right? It's like, no, you guys should have settled this, but it looks bad to your voters that you decided to fight this. So
NCAA is just we're just
blame these crazy courts. Oh, weird.
The NCAA is your local water commissioner.
Yeah, dude, exactly. Actually, I've got a take that a listener floated to us. He said the NCAA is actually, and this is perfect. He said it's Ticketmaster. He said, think about it. All the artists, the artists loved, they say they hate Ticketmaster, but they love Ticketmaster because all the people complain about Ticketmaster instead of complaining about the artist. So it's basically a shield for all the stuff the artists really want to do. They just have Ticketmaster do it. Like the NCAA is the exact same thing. The other day we banned pre-decorating of hotel rooms in the sport. People are like, wow, the NCAA, why would they do this? It's like, guys, all the schools wanted this. They're operating as a business. Do you know how you have to pre-decorate a hotel room? You got to buy the night before's hotel room. So think about all the hotel room savings that you're saving now. And so for some of these schools, like if you're in a major city, they're in pretty nice hotels. Like SMU uses the W in Dallas. What do you think they pay for those? Even a discounted rate's probably $400. So think about all these hotel rooms they're saving if they don't have to get in early morning because they had to buy the night before. So instead of the school saying, hey, we don't want to do this, they all passed the rule via the NCAA. So now it's an NCAA rule, even though it's really just a cost-cutting measure by the schools.
I
The
love
same
that
thing with the
analogy.
photo shoots.
Love that analogy. Like, oh, I can't believe Ticketmaster's charging you $15 to buy tickets to my show. Anyway, $250 for general admission.
Right, exactly.
Charlie Baker was asking for congressional help. What? And he's out there claiming that 95% of schools would, go bankrupt. It would, have to kill a lot of sports that are out there. So you could have Congress over, I have no idea, to have them overrule the courts?
No, they're asking for an antitrust exemption because all of this stuff that they're getting rung up on, Alston, the Johnson case, the House case, which stay tuned to the channel. We actually have some cool stuff coming on that. Those are all because the NCAA is running afoul of antitrust. They're colluding all the schools via the NCAA because the NCAA is made up of its member schools to keep prices down, to price fix, or in this case, to just not pay their employees at all. If you read the Supreme Court decision, he's like, I believe this was
it was Kavanaugh.
It was Kavanaugh. He
Yeah.
said, hey, guys, the labor being unpaid cannot be a central selling point of why your product is good. That business model is flatly illegal, as he called it. And he said just the same thing as you can't say, hey, people love our restaurant because we don't pay our servers anything. That's just not allowed. So
what are examples, and I'm sorry to put anybody on the spot here who might know this, but what is an example of antitrust exemption being granted? Where is a place where that happens?
Professional sports leagues.
Yeah.
Okay.
Professional sports leagues.
Right.
So the NCAA wants what the pro sports leagues get, but they don't want them to be pros.
And so that means that they're allowed to have a salary cap that and allows them to, build in a draft and all these other things that, would not pass a competitive test. I get an antitrust test, but because they've got these professional sports leagues have this antitrust exemption from Congress, that therefore they're allowed to set it all up through collective bargaining. Is that the way that this works?
yes.
Yes. Also, Amazon, Apple, all these other companies. They don't have it, but they have it.
Informal.
Is there-
Informally.
Yeah. I've heard a few coaches. I talked to Mike Loxley at the Super Bowl last year, and he was one of the first one that said, let's have a salary cap. Let's put $30 million. He just gave Rand up. He didn't give much thought to it. He was like, let's put, $30 million in, and we'll say that's for the players. I haven't heard a coach yet. Do you think there's any chance we could have a draft in college if it does become professional and there are employees and there is a union? Because that to me would be the most insane shakeup in the history of the sport. If you could have a 5-star from IMG or wherever that cannot go to Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State, whatever school, because they get drafted by them.
Absolutely.
I hope not.
No, look, think about it.
It happens in baseball all the time.
Yeah, that
unions
leads to
eat their young. Unions eat their young. If the schools could get away with not having to induce the young talent to come. Now, it's a weird situation because you're time limited to 4 years, at least currently, although I'm not really sure how long that's going to hold. But if the schools could cut costs by not having to basically pay for play, induce the players to come to their school, if they didn't have to compete for talent, and the current players in the collective bargaining were like, yeah, we're already on rosters. Screw these recruits, more money for us, which is entirely foreseeable, then yeah, they could do a college draft. The problem is, you wouldn't have to play for one of those two leagues. You see what I'm saying? Assuming Florida State and Clemson and Miami go to the Big Ten, and we have a consolidation here, and Notre Dame has some sort of scheduling agreement, you'd have to fold them into the draft. But assuming we get to that next level where it's 50 teams or so, you always have the option of playing for some other team if you want to, if they did do collective bargaining and you got the antitrust and all that kind of stuff.
If there's a draft in place now, does Alabama go into a rebuild after Sabin retires?
Tanking.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, it's yeah, we're just gonna go. We've got to overhaul this roster.
Hey,
Get
some
some
schools have
assets for
already
the
embraced
future.
it. They just don't know it yet. They'd be perfectly set up.
if there is a draft, I do not want it to be true. Worst teams get first pick. I would want to have some other kind of incentivization there, but
I would love to see what Barton would do with the first pick. Think about it.
Yeah.
Vandy would have like remember the Washington Nationals that they got Bryce Harper and they got Strasburg like back-to-back years. Like Vandy would probably go first in the SEC draft for multiple years in a row. I'd love to see that. Like, that'd be cool.
Barton.
And I mean, all of this, I mean, it's kind of wild, but I don't think it's that out of the realm of possibility. Again, if this is all collectively bargained and we get to this place, could you trade away a player who maybe like his lifelong dream? Oh, I got to be a member of the Crimson Tide, or I always wanted to be a Seminole, and you come there after 2 years, but they're like, nah, he ain't cutting it. Let's trade him away for a future,
Enjoy Ames.
If everybody is employees of the same conference,
right?
Then
yes,
they could. Probably could.
Boo!
I know,
But
everybody wants like the employees, and let's get them paid, which I am on board now with. I wasn't a long time ago, but I think it is one of those. Be careful what you wish for.
This is where we'd have to go through. Like, there was a big step to get to guaranteed scholarships. Remember, like there was a point where it was just like each year, you could get cut loose. Now it's a little bit with guaranteed scholarships. It's a little bit more like run off or not run off, but we're going to suggest that
think how far we've come in a short amount of time. We are moving fast.
I think that under an employment model, I think 1 year renewable contracts, I think would be able, like, I would almost rather have more free agency than allow schools to trade players. That's so brutal.
I think 1 year renewables is pretty bad for the sport. The thing that I worry about the sport, like players getting paid. I think largely this people say, I won't watch if they get paid is just pure bluster. Like we've seen the opposite.
I agree.
The inability to develop like year over year attachment to some of your players on your roster is the real negative that I see, which would have been avoidable if you had just bargained with the athletes 10 years ago. The transfer portal would have never come about in the same fashion, because the NCAA strike, like losing those cases, is very foreseeable because it's just clearly non-competes on non-employees. They're trying to run that trick again. The court's like, oh, this again? No. Also no again. So I think you want to be able to have guys under contract for all 4 years or for 3 years or whatever it is. I think that's key. I also think that the eligibility thing will eventually go away unless it's collectively bargained otherwise. Like, I mean, does the NFL want Talia? Do they want Dylan Gabriel? No. Skills-wise, those guys aren't NFL-level players, at least not good ones. But in college, I mean, Talia could probably make pretty good money if he had a year 6. Gabriel could play another 4 years at Oregon, make probably what, $5 million combined? That's, I mean, think about it.
Hold on. So we're just saying like quarterbacks just end up playing until they're like 27 or 28.
Yeah. Some of these guys who don't have legitimate NFL skills but are really good in college, there is a market for that. I think that's the argument. You get a quarterback with a weak arm who can't really make the NFL throws. You say, hey, college is a different game than the NFL. The hash marks make it so that I can earn a living in this league, but my skills don't fit this other league. I have a college skill set. Why can't I make a living using my college skill set?
So we're literally just turning it into a minor league where you've got like Kevin Costner in Bull Durham just playing until he's 40, getting the record done.
It's always been a minor league. It's just, yes, exactly. It's always been a time limited minor league.
Hey, listen, we've got a couple questions in the big old bag of mail that are very much tied to this. So I'm going to grab those and we're going to hit those and a few other topics on the other side. So coming up on the other side, yes, do we foresee the possibility of the eligibility rules changing and sports betting continuing to grow across the country? How do we see it influencing college football over the next 20 to 30 years? We'll get into that and more next.
We give thanks to the athletes who took big risks, who beat the odds despite being oddballs because of their skin. But to change the status quo, you have to be willing. This is the month we remember. But more importantly, we dream of something bigger.
Before we get into that, Bud, what you got on Cal?
So I listened the other day when my internet got cut. Literally like some yard work got cut, not cut off. I usually pay the bill. You guys did the pick one quarterback, one running back, and one receiver.
Yes.
Guys, Cal's a really good one for this.
Mhm.
Yeah, we missed that one.
Aaron Rodgers, Marshawn, Deshaun Jackson.
I know. And
Like that.
all within our general, we've been very much into college football here. That hits modern era. That was a 1, 2, 3 that we definitely came back with that I recognize. That's a strong top 3 right there.
Yeah, but you got to deal with Aaron talking about crystals.
But you've got beast mode to keep them in check.
I mean, they dealt with him at one time, right?
That at least, allows us to be able to have that, yin and yang, for that type of opportunity. All right. So I mentioned this before we went, a question from the big old bag of mail that was bubbling around. So I figured I'd bring it up. Holden, shout out to you. He left us a 5-star review. In that review, he put this question. He said, I was watching college basketball this weekend, and I noticed that I was watching teams with players who I had familiarity with more often. I think some college athletes are not made to be professional athletes, but they are valuable TV assets in college. My question is, assuming the leadership structure of college athletics moved away from the NCAA, what is stopping players from being able to play longer than 4 years? Keeping certain players around would help TV ratings. So Holden,
Did he just call human beings TV assets?
You are 100%.
I love this world we're in. I love it. It's great.
So
But
are we
everything's
YouTube
wonderful.
assets?
Are we YouTube? Portions of us, yes. Yeah, it's not all I bring to the table, but yeah, for a certain number of hours of my life, I am simply a YouTube asset. But it sounds like Holden was right there to what you were sort of hitting on. I mean, are you hearing this eligibility, in conversations with people, or is this in the no bad ideas world in terms of the future of college sports?
Some of both. You would need the right plaintiff. Okay. It's also a little bit embarrassing to be the guy that's like, hey, I'm not good enough to play in the NFL, so I need to play more college. So you probably need somebody who had a pretty good college career, whose skill set is demonstrably more suited for college than pro. If you just take some scrub who's really who could lose, actually, dude, you're not really making a living on college because you're actually not very good. You need somebody who had a pretty good college career who can say, I'm trying to think, who's a guy right now?
Is Billy Napier still on the hot seat if Tebow's his QB?
Right.
Hit up the comments, folks.
Think about it. All right, honestly, what about Jordan Travis? I haven't heard that he's going to do that. I don't think he would, but I think his skill set is much more suited for college than it is the NFL. You don't think he can make $1 million a year playing 3-4 more years of college until his legs slow down?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Penix was a 6th-year player. I mean,
Is he even going to get drafted? I don't know.
Who, Jordan Travis?
I think he probably will late, but there's not a guarantee on that. Bo Nix, the same thing. Nick's arm-wise, not real good. Now, he's going to go high enough to where I think he's still going to go pro, but...
Do you know, I forget exactly who it was, but somebody said he could be a first-rounder, and I almost fell out of my chair. But he's catching some steam. I thought it wasn't good at the Senior Bowl, but I think it was second round worst case, which I was pretty blown away by.
The tools don't suck there. I'm trying to think who's the best player to bring this suit.
The thing, I'm sorry, but
The
the thing with the
might have
QBs
been Brock Purdy.
Yeah, Brock might not be in a Super Bowl this year if this rolls around. He might have stuck around at Iowa State a couple extra years. See? Wow.
Stetson?
I think Stetson gets displaced.
A decent one, actually, because the legs are so good, and I don't know if the arm is amazing. Let's see how he does this year in South Bend. But Riley Leonard, who's really, really good at college. I don't know how well he projects to the NFL. I'm still kind of just TBD on that.
I was imagining when I was thinking about this, offensive linemen where just being older and smarter.
Yeah.
That if you built your offensive line on 7th-year dudes, they would have some of that grown man advantage against a 5-star, 19-year-old. Or maybe not every 5-star 19-year-old, Clowney, other ones that obviously have been different, but that would be a zig then zag type scenario. If eligibility went away like there's definitely the quarterback scenario and the advantage that we've seen in terms of some of these old quarterbacks as recently as this year. But it is so hard to get offensive linemen that if you were able to continue to pay these offensive linemen to stay for a 6th or 7th year, build some cohesion and get an old group. I mean, that would be a phenomenal way to set up your offense moving forward.
I got the perfect guy for that conversation. Maybe one of the most accomplished resumes in all of college football history as a lineman, Barrett Jones at Alabama.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know, it was a 4th-round pick, only lasted 2 years. He's a great dude. He did a little broadcast, and now he's in finance. But he could have been 8 now. He could still be playing.
He would be Alabama's center, like for 7 more years and 3 more titles.
Right. And it would have hit Jalen Milroe right there.
he would have.
He was over a little bit.
Yeah, so those were some of the positions that I guess came to mind. Like maybe not as much on the defensive side of the ball, where as you get older, you know, if you lose any step, you're going to be struggling. But anywhere where that sort of grown man strength and sort of mental advantage would be able to help you, I feel like that would be something that could come up if the eligibility was extended.
Speaking of grown man strength, Chip, you live in North Carolina. How many times have you seen Cam Newton in person? Didn't know you did.
I just saw him.
Oh, like at the Super Bowl.
Man, what goes through your head for those of us who have seen like Cam's physical presence in person when you see somebody try to fight Cam Newton?
Maybe if we have 5 of us, we can do it.
Well, I mean, those TSP guys aren't they're not tiny, but they look tiny compared to Cam. I remember we were down at IMG back when they were building IMG, and Cam actually does take a pretty good amount of time with his 7-on team and actually puts the work in and would, I believe, still fly back to attend practices in Atlanta, even when he was playing in Charlotte. And he's at most of the tournaments, calling the plays and whatnot. But we were in a rain delay, so we were in a portable trailer there. And I was sitting there, I was like, God, Cam Newton is just huge compared to a couple of the other NFL dudes. I'm like, that guy plays D end. And Cam Newton is much bigger than this. It's I don't know. That's just not real bright.
The way he's dressed, you got to figure he's got some sort of gadget that could, you know.
You know how tough you got to be dressed like that?
It has made the hat more iconic.
Yes.
You know, I will say the fact that he took on those 4 dudes and didn't flinch, and the hat didn't even get knocked off.
But the hat is locked in with the locks,
with the hair,
the dreadlocks. It is kind of like
doesn't matter. You are engaged in a 1-on-4 physical battle, and the hat stayed on. So that little outline that he's using for his, for his show, in the background, now this is even better branding, incredible marketing. I got to give a shout out to my guy Darren Gant. He made a great point about this. He said Cam Newton was once hit by a dump truck, broke his back, and 11 days later, he ran for a touchdown and threw for a touchdown in a win over the Browns. Which, by the way, the Cam car accident broken by our own Jonathan Jones back in the day. He was right there on site first.
Right, he had a picture right away, a picture of the truck. Right,
it was right near the Charlotte Observer offices, and he was right there on the scene. But Cam Newton is one of the most unique physical specimen of my lifetime. You win at him?
I could take him.
Do we have any details on that? Did anybody do any digging? Because I do think it's messed up. Because wasn't he tried before by some punk kid who asked him a question or something? Because he has given if you're playing against Cam's team, Cam's team does talk a lot of smack, and they get a lot of smack talk back to them, right? But I would say Cam generally does not go out of his way to talk at the kids, but he will bark back at them if they come at him. I think there's a difference though, because if you're a kid, you want to catch a touchdown against Cam's team, and then stunt for the camera and get him in the background or whatever, talking smack to him. We've seen this happen a ton at all these 7-on-7s we go to. It is a little different when the other coaches are doing it, right? Like that. And we see that sometimes. And there are pretty good sized fights at 7-on. I always worry that somebody's going to get disrespected and take it to the next level. But, there are good fights at these, but it's usually players. It's not generally the adults fighting the adults. We saw that in Texas, didn't we? It was somebody's brother. It was somebody famous's brother shot somebody.
I think that was it a real game or a 7-on?
It might have been a real game, but I mean, to your point, like these things devolve in a hurry. I just think it sucked because Cam, I do think he's done a ton for the 7-on-7 community. As you mentioned, like flying back and forth just to be there for practice. I'm sure he's putting a lot of money and time into that. So I hate seeing that.
Yeah. Let's do one last question left over from the big old bag of mail. Paul writes in the 5-star mailbag, love the pod, best CFB coverage around, not even close. RIP Barton, the Slayer bouncer savant. Always remember the time that Barton was a bouncer at a Slayer concert. Off-season mailbag questions. With the rise in sports gambling in recent years, it's becoming obvious that the betting markets are a major driver of fan interaction. Yet, it isn't readily self-apparent how it will impact the sport as a whole or the specific game being played on the field. Y'all frequently mention how the television contracts of the 90s have driven college football in certain directions. I was wondering if you could put on your best Nostradamus hat and project where sports betting might drive the sport in 20 or 30 years. Go Bearcats, Paul. I've got one answer. It's small. Standardized injury reports.
That'll happen way sooner than 20 or 30 years. That's
what I'm saying. Like that is the one thing what does the sport look like in 20 to 30 years? Geez, I don't know. But if you want to ask about sports gambling's influence on college football, I believe very, very soon we are going to reach a point of standardized injury reports. It's happening some places already. I think it will be much more widespread. And in whatever we're talking about college football at the highest level, whether it's the Super 2 or something else, called something else, I believe that organization moving into the future will have standardized injury reports.
Agree with you on that one.
I think 20 years from now, we'll have reached critical mass, or at least surpassed it, and it won't be anything like it is today. Like if you look at European sports like soccer, I mean, gambling has been legal there for a long time. And, a lot of the teams have, like online casinos as their primary sponsor on their shirts. But when you watch a soccer match, you're not hit over the head repeatedly with gambling content because it's just part of the norm there. And I think now here, since it's still relatively new everywhere, and some places don't even have legal sports betting yet, I think for the next few years, we're going to continue to be hammered over the head with it constantly. But I think there will be a critical mass and just start to see it kind of the influence and the prevalence of it kind of fade a bit.
I think you will have networks work together more with the odds providers. For instance, 10 years from now, I would expect the CBS broadcast, because they have a partnership with FanDuel, to late in games, especially in blowout games, they'll ask FanDuel like, hey, what 4 player props are still undecided at this point, right? And maybe you sidebar that, right? Or at least it's going to become a talking point of the broadcast. Okay, like we know that the 4 most popular things that got bet by our audience are these 4 things. Here we go. There's still a pretty good chance for this guy to get this. This one's still in doubt, and they'll, much like they now slip in things over. And this game is over. As sort of a wink, wink, nod, nod. I think there's less winking and nodding to it. I think it's probably just like, all right. And a lot of people are happy now because the over hit. And also that is a second touchdown to that. And it paid 10,000 to 1 or whatever, because this rando tight end scored 2 touchdowns. Probably that more integrated marketing in the game is where we're going with that. I think it's going to become more obnoxious.
I could see this trend of, so Ohio is taking player props out of college sports.
Monsters.
Charlie Baker driving that train. I will be
Fire Charlie Baker.
I'll be interested to see if other states continue to jump on. But there are some states already where they don't allow individual player props for college sports. I will be curious if that becomes a campaign.
Well, that's because they're amateur athletes, but how long is that going to last?
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll see a championship in Vegas in the next 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Or playoff games. We're already seeing conference championships there.
Oh, we will have the ESPN's win probability model will get replaced by the live betting odds.
Oh,
at some point, like that.
Somebody should jump on that now,
which are just already.
Well, just don't. Let's just replace the analytics go for it bug with live odds. Okay, that's just a Let's no longer do the go or kick. We're not going to do
No,
that.
I need to see the situation for kick. I haven't seen one yet. It's always go.
It's always go.
It could be like 4th and 73 at your own 4, and it's like the analytics say you got to go for it here.
Reggie in the tailgate, coaching carousel news today. Well, I'm glad you asked because, I have learned my lesson and I am not going to put a bow on anything. We are on Wednesday going to be doing a recap of the assistant coaching carousel. There are still moves being made. We've got like Alabama has not even officially confirmed half of its staff. We know, thanks to great reporting from people like Matt Zenitz, Pete Thamel, we can put the pieces together, but the school hasn't even officially confirmed all of those yet. But we generally know some of the biggest coaching additions at the assistant level, some of the biggest coaching losses at the assistant level, teams that have upgraded their staffs and ways to grade some of the new hires and their staff. We'll get into all that and more with an assistant coaching carousel recap coming up on Wednesday. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernell. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. Follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See ya.